When you look at your future as a trader, how far do you see this journey going? How long do you think you'll have to wait until you start to become consistently profitable, if you aren't already? How long until you think you can truly consider yourself to be a great trader? Well, I'm not going to kid you and say it's going to happen quickly. It won't. It's going to take a lot of time. But that doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be losing money or wasting time until that point. But to truly make it as a great trader and consistently perform at a high level, it's going to take some time. The interesting thing is, anyone technically has the ability to become a great trader. The important thing is how we go about doing it. So what is it that separates the people that are really going to make this happen for them and will have the perseverance to see this journey out until they hit the success they want, to the people who will give up after a year or two and just think it's not possible for them? A lot of this comes down to something called grit. I first introduced this to you in the last video of the Great Trader series, and if you haven't seen that, then I recommend watching that first to get an overview, and that will also show you how some of the concepts then link together as we now start to focus on the individual components that will help us to build our talent in trading. The concept of grit is based on the work of Dr. Angela Duckworth, who likes to sum up the concept with a quote by Will Smith. He says, "I've always considered myself to be just average talent, and what I have is a ridiculous, insane obsessiveness for practice and preparation. The key to life is on a treadmill. When I say I'm going to run 3 miles, I run 5. With that mentality, it's actually difficult to lose." So let's explore this concept of grit, specifically to understand how we can develop it in ourselves and use it to make sure we don't lose in the long term on our journey to becoming a successful trader or world class in anything else, and to make sure we fully fulfill our potential. The concept of grit is one that really fascinates me, and you can see it playing out in everyday life. Not only by looking at the successful people in any field, but even just the people that I interact with on a day-to-day basis. I mean, I can really tell the difference in my emails or on our online forum between the people that have real grit when it comes to trading and those that unfortunately don't. But luckily for us, grit is something that can be developed. And this is what I want to talk about in this video. In the Great Trader series, I explained what grit is, and I even included a little quiz so you could get a score of how much grit you have, what your level of grit actually is. So that's a great place to start so that you know what you're working with, whether you have a lot of grit or not very much. Either way, it doesn't matter, we're going to develop it, but you can start off there. So there are a few areas I want us to focus on to improve our levels of grit for trading. These are amongst the points that Angela Duckworth points out in her work, and I want to shape them for you to make them really practical for you to embrace them for your development in trading. In any case, it has been shown that grit levels increase as we get older anyway, as you can see from this chart here. So inevitably, you will improve in your levels of grit as you get older. But in terms of what we can control, the first concept I wanted to discuss is that of purpose. You see, grit is seen as being the combination of passion and perseverance. And that second word, perseverance, is nothing without passion. If you're not passionate, you're not going to have the ability to see something through for the long term. And as we know from the Great Trader series, becoming a world-class talent takes many, many years, since you need thousands of hours of deliberate practice. So perseverance over the long term is going to require passion. In terms of grit, passion can be broken down into a combination of interest and purpose. Interest is quite straightforward. I'd hope that you're getting involved in trading because you're actually interested in the activity of trading itself and not just because of the money. I think I've made that clear enough by now, so I don't think we need to go down that road any further, but this is an important part of grit. You need to have a genuine interest. It's not just about the money. In fact, Jeff Bezos, the founder and CEO of Amazon, once said, "One of the huge mistakes people make is that they try to force an interest on themselves. You don't choose your passions choose you." But how about that second point, purpose? In Angela Duckworth's studies of people, she found that purpose far outperformed enjoyment on the grit scale. But not only that, She also found that purpose was more important when it was defined based on how something you're doing will benefit other people, not necessarily yourself. It was all about how you're contributing to the lives of the people around you, how your life had a meaning that was greater than just yourself. So it wasn't necessarily a selfish act. And you might choose to neglect this and think, it's okay, I'll push through anyway. But that isn't what tends to happen. Instead, you might push through, but not actually continue developing. As we can see from this chart, over time we have three categories. We have the people that will drop out. Trading's too hard for them, or they suffer a bad experience early on, maybe from going live before they're ready and then losing money. Then we have Arrested Development, not the TV show, and the world-class experts. Without this passion and purpose, you're likely to fall into the Arrested Development category. You'll reach a certain amount of potential and then you'll plateau there, certain amount of ability. Now, if that level of potential is below being a profitable or consistent trader, you aren't going to have a very good time. So let's move on to the second point. If you know you have passion and purpose in what you're doing, what can we do to really boost our level of grit? Well, funnily enough, one big way is to be aware of the concept in the first place. It's just like the video we did on fixed and growth mindsets, which is heavily linked to the concept of grit. They go hand in hand. And in fact, the psychologist who developed both of these concepts have actually worked together. That's how close these two concepts actually are. So basically, studies showed that in a school, children who were explained the concept of grit and things like deliberate practice, perseverance, and were shown how high performers put in hours and hours and hours of work before they even get to the level of competing, let alone winning, these children were seen to then outperform the children in a neutral test case over the course of a school term. So simply by being aware of grit, you can actually become more gritty. That's what's happening with these children after they knew about the concept. And I think it doesn't hurt to remind yourself every now and again what grit is all about. It can sometimes even be motivational just in itself to realize that hard work can actually outperform all other traits. I think a nice way to sum it up is by watching a clip that Angela Duckworth actually takes the prime example of what it means to be gritty. Once again, it is from Will Smith. Check it out and maybe even come back to this if you need a reminder in the future of the sort of attitude that really sums up grit.
The only thing that I see that is distinctly different about me is I'm not afraid to die on a treadmill. I will run.
You would not be outworked.
I will not be outworked.
Right.
Period. You might have more talent than me. You might be smarter than me. You might be sexier than me. You might be all of those things. You got it on me in 9 categories. But if we get on the treadmill together, right, there's 2 things. You're getting off first, or I'm going to die. It's really that simple.
And this brings me on to one of the most important parts of grit, which I would describe as putting things in the right perspective and understanding where to put your focus. You see, when we fail at something or when things start going wrong, it's our natural tendency to look at the things we can't control and blow those out of proportion. Instead, we need to apply our focus on the things that we can control and try to improve those things specifically. This ties in with the concept of fixed and growth mindsets, which we did actually do a focus video on after the Great Trader series. You'll find it on this channel. If you have a fixed mindset, you'll consider your talent or your ability to not be something that you can grow. In reality, over the long term, you can develop your talent in whatever it is, but you need to adopt a growth mindset to be able to do that. However, when it comes to grit, this isn't specifically about our own mindset either. With trading, we have something very specific, another variable that's in the equation, the market. We can't change the market, it is what it is. So rather than focusing on how difficult we're finding the market, or focusing on things we can't change, such as how much money is at our disposal, or how much access to information we have compared to an investment banker or a hedge fund, instead, we need to focus on the things that we can change, the things that we can develop. Even if this is only 10% of the overall equation, it's still something we can control. Why dwell on the 90% of things that we can't control? Let's work on that 10%. So if you made a big loss, you can't change that now. It's happened. What you can do is look at what actually did take place, what happened, and work at changing what went wrong. then you have a chance in the future to make back what you've lost and to continue on your path of development. It's all about the process of developing, not necessarily individual results. Now, an important thing to consider about progress and development, which we did discuss in the Great Trader series, is that when you want to use your ability, you should of course make full use of your strengths. But when you're developing your ability, you need to focus on working on your weaknesses. Now, these are the things that are in your control, which brings me on to one final point about grit. You can be as gritty as you want, but if you're working on something that's a dead end, it won't ever work. Now, this can count for whole industries if you're working hard at something in a dying industry, or it can be about strategies or things like that. For example, you can work forever on a trading strategy that doesn't work, and no matter how much time you're putting in, if that strategy doesn't work, it won't suddenly start working. It's not just about you at that point, it's also about working on something that is not a dead end. This is where we need to understand the topic of cognitive dissonance as well. Like we did speak about in the Great Trader series, which I keep referring to because it was very important, and we did it in a separate video of its own. So we need to start looking at things objectively, analyze what's going right or what's going wrong, and if it's clear the thing isn't controllable by us, then we need to change our focus to something that is controllable. But there's no point being in denial or trying to make excuses. Now, I hope you're starting to see the connection between some of the recent videos and the different concepts that we've had based on that initial series of ours. Now, for the time being, I think you've had a lot to take in from this video, and I'm going to leave it there. But we will be releasing a video soon on deliberate practice, which is another piece of the talent building puzzle, so you can start to understand how to actually take on all of this that you've learnt practically and to work on it every single day. But until then, if you've liked this video, please do hit that thumbs up button. Please leave a comment below letting us know your thoughts on the topic or any questions you have or anything that you found is actually going to change the way you progress with your trading. I really appreciate you watching. Now go and put in practice some of the things that we've discussed. Take care and I'll see you soon.